Morning, everyone. Welcome to the 1,637th Special Board Meeting of the Board of Trustees, Metropolitan Sewer District. Roll call.
Ms. Fair.
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes. Okay, no comments from the public. New business, item number 3.
All right, I think I'm going to let Marion have a minute to talk about the item before we introduce.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. The board approves preliminary tax rates in June as part of our annual budgeting process. Normally in August and September, we receive additional property assessment valuation information from the assessor's office. So we're required to make changes to our tax calculations. So what you have before you today are those changes as a result of the increased valuations. For the most part, our taxes remained flat from our initial calculation. We have two major stormwater taxes. We refer to them as the 10-cent tax, which is used to fund operation and maintenance of our stormwater system and some limited capital. And we have a 2-cent tax, which pays for regulatory services related to the stormwater activities. As the board was made aware of in June, we did reinstate 6 OMCI taxes, and those are reflected in the schedules which should be on page 5 of the agenda that you received. As depicted on that schedule, our estimated tax revenues did increase slightly by about $400,000. Again, that was the result of the increased assessment values, not any increases in the tax rates per se. So are there any questions that I can answer that the trustees may have? Okay.
All right, thank you. Hearing no questions, we'll move to the introduction and adoption of proposed ordinance number 15512, repealing ordinance 15419, adopted June 11th, 2020, and enacting a new ordinance in lieu thereof, adjusting the previously fixed taxes by determining the amount of taxes which shall be levied, assessed, and collected in the year 2020 on all taxable tangible property in the district within the corporate limits of the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County respectively, and in sub-districts within the corporate limits of St. Louis County as follows: Coldwater Creek Trunk Subdistrict, Graveway Creek Trunk Subdistrict, Main Creek Trunk Subdistrict, Watkins Creek Trunk Subdistrict, Subdistrict number 89, Subdistrict number 342, Subdistrict number 366, Subdistrict number 367, Subdistrict number 369, Subdistrict number 448, Subdistrict number 449, Subdistrict number 454, Subdistrict number 455, Subdistrict number 1 of the River de Pere watershed, and Subdistrict number 7 of the River de Pere watershed. Board of Trustees, in accordance with Charter Section 7.310, authorizes the Director of Finance to certify as to the amount of taxes which shall be levied, assessed, and collected within the corporate limits of the City of St. Louis and St. Louis County, and for the aforementioned sub-districts with an emergency clause. Is there a motion for introduction?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Fair?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Do I hear an objection to the suspension of the rule? Hearing none, is there a motion for adoption?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Fair?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
All right. We have one more item. That is a resolution. This is the adoption of Resolution 3621, identifying and designating a civil service commissioner to serve on the Civil Service Commission of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District per Section 8.020, the Charter Plan of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. The commissioner is Michael Harvey. Is there a motion for adoption?
So move. Second.
Thank you. Ms. Fair?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
All right, both items are adopted. There is no further business for this special meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now we're ready to go to committee meetings?
So you need to go ahead and adjourn, and then we've got about 7 or 8 minutes before we can start the committee meeting.
Okay. So no further business in the special meeting. A motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we'll call the 210th meeting of the Program Management Committee to order.
We'll note that all trustees are present.
I ask the trustees to review the minutes of September 1, 2020 meeting.
So move.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Ooh. All in favor? Approval? Thank you.
Next on the agenda, the Engineering Department agenda items.
Good morning, everyone. Got quite a few items this morning, so I'll be moving pretty fast. If you have a question, make sure you stop me. I'll leave time after each one to answer any questions. The first item on the agenda today is the Upper Maline Trunk Sanitary Relief Section B. This action requests the appropriation of additional funds for an ongoing construction project with J&J Boring. The work being done under the contract consists of construction of approximately 45 feet of 36-inch sanitary sewer and approximately 6,000 feet of sanitary sewer and tunnel from 36 to 42-inch in diameter. This construction is the second phase of a multi-phase improvement project. The purpose of the project is to alleviate overcharged sanitary sewers, and it does allow for the elimination of one constructed overflow. This supplemental appropriation of $750,000 is required to complete the construction due to additional costs related to unstable soil conditions, utilities, shoring, and an alternative tunneling method in lieu of dewatering. This supplemental appropriation will bring the total appropriation for this project to $11,150,000, and it will fully fund the construction and allow the completion of the project. Are there any questions? All right. The next item is the CSO Mary Avenue south of Manchester's CSO Interceptor Elimination Project. This action appropriates funds for an intergovernmental agreement with the Missouri Department of Transportation Commission. The Board of Trustees adopted Ordinance 15378 on March 16th, which authorized the district to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Transportation. This is part of the Brentwood-bound work that's going on in the corridor there on Manchester between Hanley Road and Brentwood Boulevard. But the Missouri Department of Transportation is also doing reconstruction on Manchester Road in this area. This ordinance appropriates funding for the agreement with MoDOT, which consists of the construction of 706 feet of 12 to 36-inch diameter sewers. The estimated cost for this work is $1.3 million. This agreement provides for the reimbursement of the sewer construction bid price to MoDOT, incorporating the MSD project scope in the MoDOT project that they have going. The city of Brentwood is actually constructing a portion of this project. The Missouri Department of Transportation is doing a section. Once their work's complete, then the district will actually have a portion that we will bid and construct on the upstream side. But this is the downstream portion that is all located within those development areas. So we do quite often, we'll coordinate with the development to get them while they're doing their work. That way we're not disrupting it after their work or are actually in conflict with them. So it's kind of a partnering effort that we do. All right, moving to the next item. This is a CSO Green Infrastructure Volume Reduction Grant Project for St. Henry Place. The ordinance authorized the district to enter into agreement with Affordable City Homes of St. Louis to provide financial assistance through the Green Infrastructure Grant Program for the construction of green infrastructure. The purpose of this project is to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River. Per the long-term control plan, the project will reduce runoff with the installation of 19 amended soil areas and 7 permeable pavement areas. The total cost of this project estimated at $124,000. and Affordable City Homes is requesting approximately $124,000 reimbursement for the grant. In your packet, there's a map, kind of shows the location of the redevelopment of the homes in the area. Not too far from here, just a bit south on Jefferson and just north of Highway 44. It's called the Gate area, but it's also adjacent to the Lafayette Square area. So you'll see a number of new homes that are going in the 1200 block of Rutger and in the 2800 block of Hickory, some additional homes. What they do is they're vacant lots, they'll build new homes, and then they'll, in the backyards and in the parking areas on the alley, they'll use permeable pavement and they'll put in amended soils that rather than put the downspouts into the combined sewer system, they'll discharge them into the yards and it'll soak in. That's where we get the benefit from. All right. The next item is the Deer Creek Sanitary Tunnel. This appropriates additional funds, and this is planned appropriation for this construction project for a contract with SAK Construction. The work being done consists of construction of approximately 22,814 feet of 19-foot diameter concrete lined tunnel and other associated work. The purpose of the project is to provide additional storage during wet weather by allowing surcharge sewers in the Deer Creek watershed to discharge to this tunnel. It allows for the elimination of 10 SSOs within the Deer Creek watershed. This project is scheduled to be completed sometime next year. This is a partial funding request. It's actually the last funding request. This supplemental appropriation of $15 million will bring the total appropriation for the project to $153,350,000, and again, will fund the full construction of the project. In your packet, I asked Alan, our construction manager, to kind of provide a drawing of where we're at with the project and kind of remind the trustees about the project since it is such a large project. On the front page, you'll see the actual alignment. Again, it's just south of 23,000 feet. The inside of the tunnel is 21.5 feet. The actual red line that you see on the map is already complete. You may have seen information on that, and there's been some videos that the district has done when the tunnel machine actually holed out at the Haddington drop shaft located at the top of the picture. So right now, the contractor is actually going in and he's pouring a liner inside that tunnel using concrete forms and pumping concrete in there. If you go to the next page, turn it over for me, you'll see the tunnel head. That's when it came out up at the Haddington shaft, and then that tunnel machine was removed at that location. And if you go bottom left hand, that's actually a picture of the apparatus that's used to pump concrete into the tunnel. And at the top right, those are the forms. In other words, these forms are constructed, and then there's concrete poured in behind those forms. The concrete's allowed to set, and then bottom right is the actual finished product. So they're about a third of the way done on this concrete forming process. I think they can do about 1,500 feet a day doing it. It's quite an operation, but the project's going well, and again on schedule to be complete, which is very important for the Deer Creek watershed because we've got several large open cut projects that are under construction that will bring flow to this during wet weather events. All right. Moving on to the next item. This is the Gravelway Trunk Sanitary Rehabilitation Project. This too is a planned appropriation for additional funds. The second year of funding for this project. Project is being constructed by SAK Construction. The work on this contract consists of rehabilitation of approximately 40,000 lineal feet of sewers 36-inch to 72-inch diameter using cured-in-place pipe. This is the existing Gravois Creek trunk. The rehabilitation of 103 manholes and 29 service connections. The purpose of this project is to reduce inflow into the Gravois trunk sewer. This too is a partial funding request, and it'd be the final appropriation to complete the job. The supplemental appropriation of $6.8 million will bring the total appropriation for this project to $16,800,000, and again, fully funded the project. This is a project we're actually funding utilizing state revolving funds loan program for funding of this project. All right. The next item is the infrastructure repair rehabilitation contract A for fiscal year 2021. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the rehabilitation of approximately 65,000 lineal feet of sewers, 6 to 24-inch in diameter, using cured-in-place pipe method. The purpose of this project is to reduce infiltration and to rehabilitate older, damaged, deteriorated sanitary sewers throughout the district. These sewers are identified for rehabilitation through our annual CMOM program, our sewer inspection program that's run by our operation division. Mr. Berthold reports on the CMOM program twice a year, and what they identify for rehabilitation, then we use this contract then to rehabilitate those sewers. On this particular project, we received 3 bids. The low bid was from In Situ Form Technologies USA. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $2.2 million is below the budget for the project. The CIPP project are cured in place. The district has a standing loan program with the state revolving fund, which has an MBE and WB goal of 10% each. On this particular project, In Situ Form is providing just under 21% MWB participations with the firms listed. All right, moving on to the next item. Next item is the Lower Merrimack River System Improvements, the Baumgartner to Fenton Wastewater Treatment Plant Tunnel, treatment facility tunnels. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the mining of approximately 36,000 feet of 11-foot diameter tunnel in the Lower Merrimack watershed using a rock tunnel boring machine. The construction of 6 drop structures, including near-surface structures along the alignment. It would make the connection to the existing Baumgartner tunnel that feeds into our Lower Merrimack treatment plant. The purpose of this project is to allow for the elimination of the interim Fenton treatment plant and several pump stations along the way. This is a consent decree project. Along this alignment along the Mississippi River, there are several pump stations that are reaching the end of their useful life. So we'll be able to eliminate those pump stations with this tunnel, along with the Fenton treatment plant that's located in downtown Fenton. The flow will all go to our Lower Merrimack plant. There's several that's being under design right now to expand to take these flows. There's several other items on tonight's agenda associated with this. The district received one bid that was responsive. We did receive 3 bids. The 2 bids were both higher, were non-responsive to the MWBE portion of it. But the low bid, SAK Construction, was responsive to the MWBE. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $180 million is below our original budget of $206 million. At this time, we're only appropriating $32 million. There'll be appropriations. This is about a 4-year project. Will be appropriation additional monies for, again, a total of $180 million. The contingencies, the $180 million total does include some about $250 billion, I'm sorry, $250,000 for utility relocations during the project. This is a project, too, that we're funding with state revolving fund loans, which then puts an MBE goal of 10% and a WBE goal of 10%. SAK is providing a total of 24.17% MWB participations with a number of firms that are listed there on the board item sheet. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Rich, this is Jim. Boy, that's a huge project to only get one compliant bidder. It's kind of astounding.
I would defer to Shauna possibly to answer that. I wasn't involved in the review. I know at least the second bidder provided information that he was going to meet MWB, but there were some clarifications that he did not supply. In other words, as we were reviewing it. In other words, he provided that he was going to meet it, but then we were looking for clarifications and he didn't provide those. Is that correct, Shauna?
But he was higher than
Yes.
SAK?
Yes, SAK was a low bid, and there were two more bids that were both generally in the range. I think you guys get the three bids with your packet. I'm not certain.
I don't think we do.
Well,
So there were three bidders. SAK was the lowest, and they were also the only one compliant with the minority contracting rules. I think that's what you said.
that is correct.
Yeah, Jim, if you think about this too, there's often, Sean is doing her job, there's information she's asking for that's pretty extensive in some cases. It's not unusual for folks who are not the low bidder to not spend the time doing that when they know there's a low bidder that's already met the goals. So that does happen on occasion. That could have possibly driven some of this as well.
Is there, is there some concern that SAK has locked up the minority contractors and there's a shortage for other bidders on a big project like that?
Well, Jim, I think I don't believe so. I think I'd lend it more towards kind of the explanation I gave, and Sean has been shaking her head yes to me. This isn't unusual on this or other projects. We traditionally check the three lowest bidders to see if they are responsive. And if we have questions of others and they already know they're not getting the job because they're second or third, oftentimes they simply won't follow up with our request because it's just not worth their time. I think that's probably more what happened here.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, moving on to the next item. This is the Lower Merrimack Tunnel I&I source reduction. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the rehabilitation of approximately 6,100 linear feet of sanitary sewers 8-inch to 60-inch in diameter using the cured-in-place pipe method, the rehabilitation of 94 manholes and 21 service connections. The purpose of this project is to reduce inflow and infiltration in the Matisse Creek watershed and along the Matisse Creek trunk sewer, which actually drains to the existing tunnel near Baumgartner, the old Baumgartner Road site. The district received two bids on this project. SAK was the low bidder. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $1,750,000 is below our budget amount. It was also below our design estimate. SAK is providing 27% MWB participation, which meets a goal of 10% minority and 10% women on the project. All right. The next item is the Riverport 6 pump station rehabilitation. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the replacement of pumps, valves, control panels, and other miscellaneous electrical components. The purpose of the project is to extend the useful life of the existing Riverport 6 pump station. The district received 5 bids on this project. The low bid was from Kelp Contracting. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $1,150,000 is above the original budget of $1 million. The MBE goal for this particular project was 17% African American. Kelp Contracting has met that goal. He's providing 19.87% MBE participation on the project. The next item is the Spirit of St. Louis 2 Pump Station Replacement Project. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the replacement of pumps, valves, control panels, and other miscellaneous electrical components. The purpose of this project is to extend the useful life of the existing Spirit of St. Louis 2 pump station. The district received 2 responsive bidders. There were other bidders, but they were deemed non-responsive. There was an addendum. They both acknowledged the addendum, and it had a new bid form on it, and they actually submitted the wrong bid form. It was missing some bid items and some other information, and one of the bidders actually qualified their bid, which we do not allow. So they were deemed non-responsive, which left us 2 responsive bids, the low bid being from L. Keeley Construction Company. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $1,770,000 is above our budget for the project. We increased due to additional dewatering that we found during the design that wasn't taken into consideration when we set the budget for the project. L. Keeley is committed to just under 24% MBE participation, which meets the 17% goal for the project. Next item is the Weatherby Drive Storm Sewer Project. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 473 feet of storm sewers, 12 to 18 inch in diameter. The purpose of the project is to alleviate yard erosion and flooding issues in the 1400 block of Weatherby and the 1100 block of Crimson Drive in unincorporated St. Louis County. The district received 4 bids on this particular project. The low bidder was Fred M. Luth and Sons Incorporated. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $165,000, which includes $25,000 for utility relocation, is below our budget amount for the project. Fred M. Luth is committed to 17.1% MBE participation, which meets the 17% goal for the project. The next item is the Wilborn Drive Storm Sewer Project. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work being done in this construction will be the construction of approximately 130 lineal feet of storm sewers, 12 inches in diameter, and 19 feet of combined sewers, 12 inches in diameter, and additional appurtenances. The purpose of this project is to alleviate basement flooding at 5361 Wilborn and yard flooding in the 5300 block of Wilborn and the 5300 block of Hamilton in the city of Jennings, Missouri. The district received 3 bids on this project. The low bid was from Enterprise Sewer and Drain. The bid was below our designer's estimate. Our appropriation of $90,000, which includes $20,000 for utility relocation, is below our budget for the project. Enterprise Sewer and Drain is committed to 17.53% MBE participation, which meets the 17% goal for the project.
Is that a new company, Enterprise?
They've been working in our small sewer, but I think this is probably the second small storm sewer job that they've done. Generally, small storm sewer are part of the small sewer or small contractor program. This next item is the Geyer Sanitary Relief and Windsor Springs Storage. This is a request to proceed to condemnation. Excuse me. This ordinance authorizes the staff to proceed with further condemnation efforts, including the filing of all necessary court pleadings and documents leading to the acquisition of permanent easements and temporary construction easements on 6 parcels of ground located in the city of Kirkwood. The easements and temporary construction easements are needed to construct the project, which consists of approximately 6,500 linear feet of 10-inch force main to upgrade the Windsor Spring Pump Station and to perform private I&I on several properties. The purpose of this project is to alleviate overcharge conditions at the Windsor Springs Pump Station and alleviate wet weather building backups. The district has currently been unable to settle with 6 of the property owners. In your packet, there are some plats showing the location. The project as a whole required 13 easements. We've already got 7 of those projects, leaving 7 remaining for condemnation. If you go to the first map there, the parcel 1, actually, we just received that. The next parcel is parcel 4, which I believe is on the next page. That's an easement that's actually part of subdivision trustees. And working with the county at this time, our biggest issue is we're having trouble getting a hold of who the trustees actually are to even begin negotiations. And once we find the trustees, we don't feel like there's going to be an issue getting that particular easement. Parcel 6, which is up the right-hand corner of this, this is one where we just can't get the homeowner to respond to us. It's an easement along the railroad. In some cases, it's not a very disruptive easement, but we just can't get the homeowner to respond to us in any manner. On parcel 9, which is at the lower end, the easement terms actually have been agreed to. We're keeping it on this list in case something falls apart, but we believe we're going to get that easement. And then finally, the following 2, parcel 12 and 15, we're actually in active negotiations and feel like we should be able to attain both those easements. Trading letters back and forth on the value of those easements. So we're pretty confident that all but one of these we should be able to continue to acquire.
Rich, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So on easement number 2, I mean, that looks like a really big house. Is that what it is?
Easement. You mean, well, it goes from 1 to 4. Which parcel? There'll be a circle.
Well, I see 2. It says easement 2. There. It looks like the easement's on the axis.
Yeah, that one there, actually, we acquired.
So how does that, I'm just curious, how does that work? I mean, it looks like that's the access to that large home. How do you?
Well, generally, that'll be part of the easement agreement as to where we'll access, what we'll do when we complete our work, and if we're actually, the sewer's just to the south of that house, probably using mostly existing easements. We just needed additional working room along that, but obviously if we use his roadway for access, if we don't build our own adjacent to it, the agreement may be that we would restore his driveway after we were complete. Those are the parts of the negotiation when we obtain the easement.
Got it. And you somehow manage the construction so that the owners can get to and from their house during that project?
And that was probably part, I don't know the specifics, but typically, yeah, you agree to, to maintain access for the homeowners. Those are the things, what trees can be cut down, what can't be cut down, and then that's provided to the contractor, and he's obligated to meet those requirements. But obviously, we have to make sure the contractor can build the work. But no, if you saw a lot of our projects come very close to houses and provide, there's a lot of disruption, which is why we have to bring projects occasionally for condemnation. It's where you just can't reach an agreement with that property owner. They have some concern that we aren't able to take care of.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. The next few projects is a large grouping. I'm not going to do them all together, but there are some groupings that I'm going to do as a group, and Tim will probably read those as a group at the board meeting next Thursday. But it's a number of general services agreements. These are professional service agreements for professional services such as surveying, geotechnical work, design services. These are contracts that we do, generally 2 or 3 year contracts that we do with engineering firms to supplement my internal staff. I've got an internal staff that does design work on smaller projects, but we outsource the surveying for that work, and then additionally the geotechnical work, and then also if there's a project that we can't get done, then we can outsource that. So that's what these general services agreement. There's also a general services agreement for landscaping type expertise. I don't necessarily have the expertise for doing some of the plantings that we see for some of our green infrastructure or some of our biostabilization. So these general services agreement provide those professional service staffs to mine. So I just wanted to kind of give you a front view before I started into these projects. So, and feel free to ask any questions as I go through. The first project is a general services agreement for facility and sewer design contract B. This appropriates additional funds and authorized staff to amend a design contract with GHD Incorporated. This ordinance appropriates funds, $200,000, and authorizes the district to enter into Amendment 1 with GHD for planning assistance of various projects in the capital improvement and operations budget. This project consists of the condition assessment and the remaining useful life assessment of small sanitary and combined storm sewer systems and treatment plant projects throughout the district in support of our planning effort. Projects will be issued by letter agreement per individual scopes. The contract amendment is for a maximum amount of $200,000, and this is the only renewal provided for the original contract. In other words, this was a 2-year contract. So our amended design total appropriation is $400,000. GHD, there are no goals typically on a professional services contract, but GHD is committed to 25% participation with the firms listed. This particular firm provides assistance in looking at equipment and systems that are treatment plants. They can go out and do studies for us, and then helps us identify future capital projects, capital needs at our treatment plants and our pump stations. All right, the next is a grouping of 3. These are the general service agreements for geotechnical services for contracts A, B, and C. The action appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a geotechnical contract. In other words, this is the 2nd year renewal in these projects. The 3 firms are Geotechnology Incorporated, Terracon Consultants, and Wrights and Jens Incorporated. Those are the 3 consultants that were renewing their contracts. The ordinance authorizes us to amend the contracts with those 3 firms, provide geotechnical services associated with the design of projects needed throughout the district. Services include soil and rock analysis, testing, recommendations of foundation, slopes, and bedding for projects completed by our in-house design staff or by other consultants. The projects are issued by letter agreement and individual scopes of services. The contract amendment for each one of the three firms is $85,000, which makes the total appropriation for all three contracts at $170,000. As far as MBE participation, typically all three will provide some MBE participation, typically in the area of drilling services. In other words, they're providing the actual geotechnical expertise, but they're subbing the drilling out to minority. Geotechnology is committed to 25%. Terracon is committed to 20%. And Rights as Gen is also committed to 25%. And all three of those participations are without a goal. In other words, on these services, we do not require an MBE participation, but we're able to get it on these projects. Any questions? All right, the following is another renewal for a general services agreement for landscape design. This ordinance appropriates funds and authorizes the district to enter amendment number 2 with DTLS for landscape design associated with the design of our projects. Services provided includes landscape architecture, horticulture services for green infrastructure and streambank stabilization for our in-house design projects. Again, projects are issued by a letter agreement for individual projects. This contract amendment is for $200,000, bringing our total appropriation to $700,000. This is actually the second renewal. In other words, we've had 3 years. This will be the third year with DTLS. This will be the final year. Next year we'll actually go out, or the next time we need these services, we'll actually go out and submit request RFPs and select a new firm to do this work. DTLS is actually a woman-owned firm, so we're getting 100% participation out of this particular contract with no goal. All right, the next item is there are multiple contracts for the general services agreement for property appraisals. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a contract for property appraisal services. This was a new selection this year, so the old contracts had expired and we went out for new services. There are 4 of these contracts. They will be with Real Estate Analyst Limited, Mueller and Neff Real Estate Appraisers, Volkert Incorporated, and Prezada Appraisal Services. All 4 contracts are for appropriation of $75,000, and all 4 will have 2 option years to provide these services. The services provided with this particular is for the acquisition of easements, property rights by negotiation, property appraisal services associated with the acquisition of easements and property rights negotiated or condemnation. The appraisal service will be provided on an as-needed basis as required to obtain property rights. Works assigned on a project-by-project basis. And again, each one of those contracts are valued at $75,000. We have 4 new contracts. When we went out for proposals on this particular project, we received 9 proposals on this particular project, and these were the 4 selected to perform these services. And the 9 firms are listed on there. There are no MBE requirements simply because this is a service that's performed by each of the individual. Out of the 9, we did receive 1 firm that was an MBE. They had proposed, or actually were under contract with us before, and their proposal wasn't very good, and they didn't perform very well the last time, so they weren't one that was selected. So unfortunately, we don't have any MBE participation for the appraisal services this time around.
Can I ask a question about that, Rich?
Sure.
it says type of contract lump sum, but it's not that we pay them 75,000 even if they don't do any work, right? Or is it?
No, that the lump sum, each individual work order, like we'll give them a project similar to the one I just asked for. Say there's 13 easements, we will get a price for them for those 13 easements. In other words, it's a work order, and then we'll review that based on, what work they plan to propose, the amount of hours and things like that. So no, we analyze each individual project. In other words, get a lump sum price for that particular project.
And then did any of the incumbents successfully, are any of them part of the 4?
I think 3 or 4 are currently incumbent or have done works. I feel like I'm talking, I don't know exactly, and I don't have somebody here to answer that, but I can tell you, but I know all 4 of these have worked for us before.
Okay.
Like I said, every
Okay.
3 years, there's a couple of these we're pretty much on here every time, but then it seems like 2 or 3 are, switch up every 3 years. I
Okay.
can get that info for you, though.
No, that's why I just got the impression that they were new. So anyway, if you're familiar with them, that's fine.
No, I know at least 2 of them we're currently using. Like I said, generally there's a couple of these that are on here almost every time, and then there's a couple new ones every time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, the next general services agreement is for sewer and channel design, Contract A. This was a new selection. This action appropriates funds and authorized staff to enter a design contract. The ordinance authorized the district to enter a contract with 1 year and 1 option year with HR Green for the design of various projects. This project consists of the design of small sanitary, combined, and stormwater project as needed throughout the district in the support of ongoing internal design efforts. This contract for is a total maximum of $200,000. We received 3 proposals on this from the firms listed. The selected firm was HR Green Incorporated. HR Green has committed to 20% MWB participation with the firm listed. And again, there is no goal for these design services, professional services. All right, the following is a renewal of surveying services for a general services agreement, and it's contracts A, B, C, D, and E. These were selected last year, so they're in their 2nd year of their contract. The ordinance authorized us to amend to amendment number 1 with Sabre Incorporated, Vols Incorporated, Civil Design Incorporated, the Sterling Company, and David Mason and Associates. All 5 contracts are for $50,000, and this is the 2nd year of the survey contracts. And then next year we'll reselect for new survey contracts. So this is the 2nd year, which will bring their total appropriation for all 5 contracts to $100,000. This is one where the firms actually do the self-performance of the work. So there's generally we won't get any subcontracting participation for minorities. But of the 5 firms, 2 of the firms are actual minority firms, and one of the firms is a woman-owned firm. So MWB participation for the overall survey program is about 60%. So we always do get good participation with the surveying work that we put out every other year. So, any questions on that? That kind of concludes the general services agreement. The next few items are actually for design services, either supplements to existing design contracts or new design contracts. The first one is the Lower Merrimack River System Improvements Baumgardner to Fenton Wastewater Treatment Facility Tunnel. This is our design consultant. This ordinance appropriates $750,000 and authorize the district to enter into a contract with HDR. This was a planned appropriation for the design of the Lower Merrimack System tunnel. They're the tunnel designer that we had the SAK construction. This is the first year of post-design services during construction of this project. Again, the Lower Merrimack Tunnel is a lump sum design for the 36,000-foot tunnel that I talked about earlier. Again, the purpose of the project is to eliminate the Fenton treatment plant and several pump stations draining to the Lower Merrimack treatment plant. The overall construction estimate for that project is around $174 million. This appropriation for design services, which is $750,000, is equal to what we had in the budget supplement. Their services that they'll be providing now that the construction will be review of the submittals and requests for information that comes from the contractor and review of any proposed changes or questions the contractor may have. And again, the project will take about 3+ years for construction. So each year we'll come back for additional money for this firm to help support that contract during the construction. Are there any questions? All right, the next is the design contract for the Lower Merrimack Wastewater Treatment Facility Expansion Phase 2. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to amend an existing design contract. This was a planned appropriation of an ongoing design project. The ordinance authorizes the district to enter an amendment number 3 and appropriates $2.4 million with HDR Incorporated for the design of the Lower Merrimack Treatment Plant expansion. It's a lump sum project for the design and preparation of construction documents to construct the expansion. The purpose of the project is increase the overall plant capacity to treat future additional flows from the Fenton treatment plant, improve reliability and critical aging of the facilities, and meet the current and future regulatory permitting requirements. The construction cost estimate for the treatment plant expansion is $118 million, and we would be bidding that in fiscal year 22. So this is a supplement to the design that's ongoing at the current time. There will be future supplemental appropriations required. HDR, there's no MBE goal on this. Under the original contract terms, committed to 7.1% MWB participation. The work that they have planned under this $2.4 million, they're planning to get close to 18%, which their participation at the present time would be close to 16%. So they're exceeding what they originally committed. But again, there's several years left on the contract. Are there any questions? Next item is New England Town Cliff Cave Pump Station improvements. This action appropriates additional planned funding and authorized staff to amend the design contract with the Sterling Company. This project originally consists of design and preparation of construction documents for about 3,800 feet of 8-inch to 12-inch diameter sanitary sewers to eliminate the Cliff Town Pump Station, which would allow for the elimination of that and prevent backups for approximately 49 properties. The appropriation of $200,000 for additional design services is below what we had budgeted for $250,000. This contract amendment was for the redesign of a new sanitary pump station and 1,800 lineal feet of 6-inch force main, and then 2,200 feet of 8 to 12-inch diameter sanitary sewers and appurtenances. This was a project we got into design, and we're going to design a gravity system to eliminate it, and we had some difficulties. This is located near the quarries down in South County. We had some difficulties with going and being able to eliminate it by gravity due to the conditions down there. So basically, we're rebuilding the pump station and going to upgrade the pump station. Still includes a good portion of gravity system. But it's one of those where if you're familiar with South County, again, we were in a quarry area, it was all rock, and we were running into some difficulties in being able to construct the existing, the gravity project for it. The Sterling Company, with this contract amendment, would make their total appropriation, I'm sorry, having trouble finding that. I don't actually have that on there. I'm sorry, $740,000 for the total design. Sterling Company is providing about just under 30% MWB participation for the project. Next item is the White Plains Sanitary Relief. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a design contract. Ordinance authorizes the district to enter into a contract with Lockmuller Group for design of the White Plains Sanitary Relief. White Plains Sanitary Relief is a lump sum cost project for the design and preparation of construction documents for approximately 28 linear feet of 8 to 15-inch diameter sewers in the Creve Court Creek watershed. The purpose of the project is to alleviate wet weather surcharging and basement backups in the area. The district requested proposals and received 2 other proposals for this particular project, and the appropriation of $400,000 for the design work is equal to the budget for the project in the capital improvement program. The Lockmuller Group has committed to just over 37% MWB participation for the design of this work, and there's no MWB goal for the project. And last but not least, this is an item request for introduction and adoption. This is emergency repair number 064's Syracuse Drive 738. It's in the University City. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into emergency construction contract. The work to be done consists of the excavation and replacement of approximately 30 feet of 39-inch segmented clay block combined sewer and associated restoration work required to provide access to the location of the break. The existing pipe collapsed due to deterioration of the pipe. It was located in an alley in University City and was causing access issues. Once repaired, the entire reach will be lined. In other words, we'll make a repair just on the collapsed area, and then we'll line the entire reach so we don't have any other problems on the area, on that particular pipe. Based on recommendation from staff, the executive director declared this project an emergency on September 10th of this month, and he notified you all via his weekly update on September 14th of this emergency. The contractor is J.H. Barra. They were selected per our MSD emergency declaration policy. The repair has been started and is expected to be complete before October 15th. The actual pipe repair itself has been complete. In other words, we've replaced the pipe, the area is backfilled, and we're left with the restoration of the alley and then the lining of the pipe. The total anticipated budget we had anticipated was going to be about $400,000. Based on the time taken by J.H. Barrett, we're going to ask for an appropriation of $300,000 for the work. And again, this will be a request for introduction and adoption at next week's meeting. And that concludes the engineering department agenda items.
Hey, Reg.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have asked earlier, but I want to, if you don't mind, before you wrap up, can we go back to Deer Creek?
The Deer Creek Tunnel?
Yeah.
Okay, like the second item? Yeah.
Yeah, it was early on.
Okay. Where we had the pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
So I know the board has spent a lot of time talking about this project. And it sounds like everything's going well, thankfully. But so I just had a question, because I recall in prior meetings us talking about, having SAK complete a portion of the work that was remaining, and then it coming back to the board to sort of consider whether an alternate path forward might be appropriate?
Actually, Amy, that's actually the Jefferson Barracks Tunnel.
Oh, okay.
Again, also SAK.
Also tunnel boring machine?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the one located in Mid-County. The Jefferson Barracks Tunnel is the one where we had the machine stock. And we spent all last winter briefing the board. We can provide an update on that at the next meeting if you'd like, kind of know how it's going.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that. I'm sorry, I confused this project with that one. So
Okay.
never mind.
Yeah, we can provide an update. Obviously, we planned at some point to come back anyway and discuss. Obviously, we need to make a decision at some point whether we would proceed in phase 2 of that project. But no, we'll provide basically a briefing for the benefit of Trustee Evans of everything that we went through, and then provide where the contractor's at today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll plan on it.
I'd like to make a comment, but this is not for the minute. There was an issue, and I talked to the director about it, that somebody approached me, and I hear it every week. I want to commend Shonda for her work and her group for the minority participation in MSD project. Because there's some people out here that's driving 270 every day on a construction project from Halls Ferry to the Chain of Rocks Bridge. And they said and this doesn't have nothing to do with MSD. First they thought it was because they was digging holes along the side of the highway. I told them that wasn't an MSD project. But minority participation with MoDOT on the highway construction from New Halls Ferry and West Florissant to the Chain of Rocks Bridge, I got some people that drive that highway every day. They say you can count the number of minorities on those projects on one hand. And they wonder how the state gets by doing that when MSD keeps up with all their projects and they have minority participation. I want to commend you, Shonda, for you all's group does do a good job on it. And I think that should be noted. I really do. But there's people that drive that every day and they count. I mean, they're faithfully. I guess that's all they do. There's a lot of unions. But they can tell you how many people, and they said they must just move one or two up the highway and then back and forth. But I want to commend you on that, the job you all do for this. Thank you.
Trustee Yates, you're lucky. Shauna will actually tell you how well she's been doing here during the stakeholders committee meeting.
Oh, okay. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, no further items from me.
All right, any other business? Okay, next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All right. I think that's good enough.
Trustee Fair, we're able to start as soon as we can. We're going to exchange some documents out here, and we'll let you know when we're ready to go.
Great.
Great, thank you.
I can't even make up the
Okay, welcome to the 259th meeting of the Finance Committee of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. Roll call, please.
We will note that all trustees are present.
All right, do we have a motion for approval of the minutes from September 1st, 2020?
So move.
Second.
All right, minutes are approved. The next item is a portfolio update.
All right, this is the monthly investment review that we do. It's up on the screen there. I'll start in the upper left-hand side. Portfolio amount we're looking at as of yesterday was a little over $563 million. That's actually probably a little lower than it should be because we did have some investments mature that'll be reinvested today. That'll put us closer to the $600 million mark. But overall, our yield to maturity is still running well ahead of the benchmark. That's because we still have a number of investments that we've entered into over the last several months, and the interest rates have been coming down. The benchmark turns over every month. So that 14 basis points you see for the benchmark is all new 1 to 3 year treasuries for this month, which is more in line with the new investments we made this month. We invested about $81 million this month at, I think, about 11 basis points. So our overall portfolio is higher, but our new investments are kind of more in line with the benchmark. Weighted average maturity, our portfolio is shorter than maturity since maturity only invests in 1 to 3 year treasuries, and we invest a large portion of our portfolio shorter so that we have those funds to pay for projects and certain operating needs. A sector allocation, moving across the top to the right, we are in line with all of our policy limits. Fund summary at the bottom, there's nothing really to point out there except for that debt project fund number of $30 million, getting a little bit low, so we have about expended, that's the money that we've borrowed for capital projects, so I'm going to be talking to you in just a little bit about some new money borrowing to fund the capital project fund to keep paying for those projects. And then the maturity distribution I already mentioned, but you can kind of see the difference there. The blue bars are our maturity distribution, the red bars are the index, and we are consistently shorter since we need funds before that 1 to 3 year period. Any questions on the operating fund portfolio? All right, I'm going to move on. I have all of the items here today, so I'll move on to the SRF 2020 update. This will be brief. Last month, you approved an ordinance for an SRF bond. It was to pay for a pump station to dewater the Deer Creek Sanitary Tunnel. About $22 million was the total amount of that borrowing. The loan closed in the middle of September, 20-year final maturity, which is typical with SRF. The interest rate on that is set as a percent of an index. It turned out to be 80 basis points for the interest rate, which is the lowest that we've ever had. The state does add an annual admin fee of about 0.5%, so the all-in cost is 1.3%, still very low. I'll show that in just a sec. Cost of issuance came in at $163,000. That's slightly lower. I think we estimated about $175,000. It's a little bit lower than what we estimated. We still, after that issuance, we still have about $565 million in the bond authorization, and we're going to start to eat that up this year. The next page, I just wanted to show you kind of where that interest rate stands. SRF is one of our lowest cost sources of funds, but you can see that the 1.3 all-in cost, which is the point at the far right of the graph, is the lowest we've had. So rates have been continuing to come down. We've been continuing to take advantage, and kind of the way that we try to take advantage of this is we've been working with engineering and talking to the state, looking for more opportunities to get more SRF loans. It's a competitive process. There's a limited amount of funds available. Everybody, who's in our situation in the state is eligible to apply for these funds. But we've been having good discussions with the state about potentially borrowing more since this is such a low source cost of funds. So that's just an update on the SRF loan that closed earlier this month. Any questions about that? All right, so then now I want to talk to you about the proposed senior bonds 2020B. This is a planned debt issuance for later this year. I have Jason Terry from Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel here. So if we get any really hard questions, he's going to take them, right? So I'll start out with, on the next page, just a little bit of a calendar. We just got the first draft of documents recently, so those have been prepared, circulated. We're getting comments on those. So in this month, what we'll do is we'll continue to review those documents. We'll add financial statements. The financial audit is wrapping up, and we'll start to prepare for discussions with the rating agencies. That'll take place next month. And so what I'm coming to you today about is the introduction of this proposed bond ordinance. So we'll vote on introduction next week at the board meeting. Adoption would be in November. So we'll have more time at next committee meeting to give you updates on kind of where things are and any changes that we're seeing. In November, then we plan on meeting with the rating agencies, finish up any due diligence with parties and certain underwriters. We'll finalize the documents and then plan on the adoption of the bond ordinance and then go to the market in December. The last note there says competitive sale and closing. I'll talk to you about that in just a little bit. We typically have done negotiated sales. This one we propose doing a competitive sale, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference in a few minutes. Next page is just a list of kind of the documents that we'll review. I don't expect this to mean a ton to you, but the key here is it's a lot of documents, and so this is really a big group effort. We get a lot of help from bond counsel, we have disclosure counsel, our own legal team helps. We get involvement from engineering and finance, all to help not only review and put together the documents, but they'll help in the rating agency presentation. So when we go to the market to help fund our capital program, it's really a big group MSD-wide effort. So it's a lot of hours, a lot of work, and a lot of paper. And so I appreciate everybody's help in this. Next page, the loan terms. We expect this to be very similar to the overall terms to previous debt issuances that we've had. We're usually in the market about every year for a large capital markets loan. One difference, as I noted, and again, I'll talk about this more in a few minutes, is we plan on this being a competitive sale instead of negotiated. And then every year when we do this, we look at potential changes in coupon structure and in debt service structure. So coupon structure, I think I have points on that on the next slide. But with this will be a 30-year final maturity. That's typically what we do in the capital markets. It'll have the same debt service coverage covenants, minimums that we've had in our other debt service agreements. What we're looking at is approximately $150 million of new bond proceeds. This will all be new money, all used to fund the capital program, and no debt service reserve fund. In the past, I think 2013 and prior, we used to have to set aside a portion of what we borrowed as kind of a reserve in case we had trouble meeting debt obligations. But the market's changed a little bit, and our high credit quality means we don't have to do that, which is great. It's more efficient for us because it means all the funds that we borrow we can use for projects. Next page, I mentioned coupon consideration. Standard is 5% coupons. Now, interest rates are obviously a lot lower than that. So what that means is if we need $150 million, if the coupon matched the interest rate in the market, we'd borrow $150 million. Since the typical coupons on municipal bonds are higher than market, we usually get away with borrowing less, let's say $120 million, but we get $150 million of proceeds. So there's a premium. The investors give us more money than the par amount of the bonds in order to compensate for the higher coupon cost. We also look at 4% coupons. We'd get obviously lower proceeds if we went to a lower coupon. It would lower overall interest rates, but it also gives us less opportunity in the future for refunding. So we look at opportunity costs. There's a kind of a balancing act we try to do. We use PFM, our municipal advisor, a lot to help us review the opportunities there. Well, we haven't made any decisions yet or recommendations on where we want to be there, so we'll come to you when we get that. We're sorted out. Debt structure considerations. Typically, we look at level debt structure, so think of that as like a mortgage where the principal and interest add up to about the same amount every year. Usually you have increasing principal payments and declining interest payments, but together they add up to about the same over a year. Other options would be something like a wrapped structure, which means that we would look at what our debt service payments already scheduled are over the next 30 years and try to fill in gaps to keep it level, maybe back end some of it. And the idea there is just to keep things kind of smooth so we don't have big ups and downs in debt service, which could potentially drive changes in the rates that we charge when we get to our rate hearings. Overall, we usually keep it pretty smooth. There may be a benefit to filling in the end just because interest rates are so low, historically low, there's less of a penalty. But I think right now we're leaning toward level debt structure like we typically do. It's just the smoothest way. Interest rates are lower than what we had estimated in our rate proposal, which means that we're locking in some lower costs, which will help us in future rate proposals to keep rates even lower than we expected. Next page are parameters. So I said 150 million is what we're looking for. So original principal amount, what we're putting in the ordinance will not exceed 155 million. We expect the final number to be less than that. Purchase price is going to be higher than the original principal amount because we plan to issue at a premium. True interest cost is going to be less than 4%. Market right now would actually be less than 3%. Market was very volatile earlier in the year. It's been more stable, but we do have an election between now and when we plan to issue, so that's something we're going to have to watch. Could potentially change our timing for when we go to market. These parameters are designed just to give us a little bit of flexibility in case things change. Cost of issuance, we expect to be less than 1% of the original principal amount. Typically, we've always been below that since this is planned to be a competitive issuance, probably even lower than usual. 30-year loan would put maturity in about 2050. And the optional redemption piece, that is on the point at which we could pay the loan back with no penalty. And so that date will probably be 2030 or 2031.
Tim, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So if you go to the, if you read the third bullet point and the fourth bullet point together, the true interest cost is anticipated to be less than 3%. Is that how you read that?
Well, so right now I say the true interest, we're putting in a parameter right now in the ordinance. So typically when we do, what we've done historically when we've done these bond ordinances is we've left some terms open, and then we've come back at the time of the sale of the bonds and done a special board meeting with the board, which would be off cycle, and we've had you approve the final terms. What we're doing here and what we did last year was kind of set some boundaries and parameters so that we don't have to have that special board meeting, because it's hard sometimes to coordinate. We've got the underwriters waiting because they've got investors that are kind of on the line. They want to make sure that they have all the terms are set so that we can finalize the sale of the bonds. So when we set these parameters, what we're saying is these are boundaries which we won't exceed. If the market changes enough that it goes outside these boundaries, then we're not going to do the sale. So so this is set with a little bit of cushion, knowing that the market might change, but we will come back to you with a final, still telling you this is exactly what transpired in the market. This is where we were. This is what the final price and terms, and then PFM always comes in the month after also and gives you kind of an update of where the market was at the time, how the sale went, and that sort of thing. Right now, today, if we were to issue these bonds, I would estimate a true interest cost of less than 3%. But I don't know what the market is going to be in 2 months. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's just, from an outsider looking at this, we're authorizing above market interest, and I guess we're doing that just in the event that circumstances dramatically change. And I know you've been trying to take advantage of these historic long-term rates to replace existing debt. So it would seem to me, I mean, would you really want, if something like happened big and interest rates went to 4% or 3.99 or something, would you go ahead with it?
I think that's a discussion we'd have with the financial advisor. I think, it's possible you have a short-term blip, but none of us know what interest rates are going to be a year from now. I think we expect interest rates to stay low for a long period of time. That doesn't mean right at this level. I think if we saw a spike up to 4, we would probably consider delaying. But if it is in the same place a few months from now, at some point we'd have to go through with the bond sale because we are about out of borrowed project funds for the capital project.
I see.
And these rates, all of these, even these parameters are set below the estimates that we used in the rate proposal, so they still are lower than our assumptions that were built into our rates. Which would indicate a level of saying.
Did you use? What assumption did you use in the rate proposal?
We used 5% coupons and yields that were ranged over the 4-year period from probably low 3s to high 4s. So, I mean, it's an average. It probably would have been 4-ish or a little over on average.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking at your chart, which stops in December 2019. I would think it goes down, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it has come down since then. Yeah, so that next page is the rate history. Those are, it shows kind of a benchmark rate, which is a 20-year general obligation bond. We are issuing revenue bonds, not general obligations, so there's always a few differences between that benchmark and where our rates end up. The triangles there are where we have issued. So you can see that has jumped around a little bit, but generally the trend is down. Today, as I said, we would expect to be even lower than the bonds that we issued last year.
So this is a big, I mean, it's a change in terms of delegation from the board to you. And, you know, you're explaining that it's hard, you know, that this becomes a last minute thing. It's hard to get the board together.
Right. Well, keep in mind that in the past, when we come to you, the sale's already been done. So,
okay.
So we're coming to you and asking for approval, but it's already been done. So
I see. Okay.
Because we don't know what the final rate's going to be until it's already happened. So I don't see it as that much of a change.
Okay. Okay. I get. Okay.
And we
Okay,
do
thank
have, you know, PFM, who's our municipal advisor, there with us every step of the way. So, you know, I'm not throwing a dart at a dartboard. We have some experts that are helping. And they're fiduciary as well. So they're going to come in and they'll actually certify that the bond deal was fair, that the rates were fair, that sort of thing as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions all right, the next few pages talk a little bit about the difference in bond sale methodology, competitive versus negotiated. I'm not going to go through all of these points. Historically, we've done a negotiated sale, which we pick the underwriter. So we have a pool of underwriters that we selected by RFP. We kind of rotate through them. The underwriter is the bank that helps us market and sell the deal to the investors. A competitive deal, we are talking about actually, and what they do, to go back a second. In the negotiated deal, we're marketing to investors. So we choose the banks that are going to help us, and then we're marketing to investors, usually mutual funds or insurance companies who will buy the bonds. And we sit down and they bid on the different maturities within if it's a 30-year bond, we usually have maturities across 27 of those years. So we look at supply and we look at demand, I should say, from the investors at each of those points, and then we use that to kind of negotiate or adjust the pricing and change maybe the structure and term of the bonds a little bit based on that. With a competitive deal, we're not selecting an underwriter up front. We're setting kind of a schedule. This is what we want the bonds to look like, putting it out there and letting the underwriters bid on it. So they'll say, and ultimately we end up taking the lowest price or the best combination of yield and cost for us. So it's a little bit different than what we've done. A lot of the paperwork is the same. We'll still be marketing, creating a lot of the same pieces. Usually costs are a little bit lower. We're not paying for underwriters counsel, for example. So I think if we go, some of this is for your review, this competitive versus negotiate on slide 9. If you can go to the next page, Janice. Just talk a little bit about pros and cons. On a competitive deal, generally you have lower issuance costs. As I mentioned, we don't pay for underwriters counsel, so that helps keep the costs a little bit lower. Potentially lower yields. We've tried to do some analysis on this. The yields between competitive and negotiated for someone like us is usually very slight. The benefits of negotiated and why we've usually gone that way is it's more flexible, so we can adjust based on where there's demand for the bonds. We can adjust the timing and maturities of our schedule a little bit. And it also allows us to use MWBE firms. We always have a couple of those in our underwriting pool. Going the competitive route, we're just relying on who gives us the best bid. So it's likely to be a larger bank, not an MBE firm. So that's what we miss out on by doing competitive. Historically, I would say we've not done a competitive deal since I've been here, which is 6 years. Um, Historically, I would say we would do one maybe just kind of level set and see where we are. Because rates are so low, I'm not sure this is like a good level set that we'll use in the future as a comparison point. But it's something that is recommended by a number. I think does GFOA recommend competitive sales? There's pros and cons.
Yeah,
Generally, our issues are also large enough that might push us to negotiate it. Competitives historically, you've seen on smaller deals. Our deals are usually pretty large. Although I would say that that's changed somewhat over time. Competitive deals have gotten larger and larger. But you do get broad market participation. It will allow firms outside of our underwriting pool to bid. Then ultimately they are responsible then for marketing those to investors. But we do have limited flexibility. So we'll set kind of the terms, coupons, structure, and the banks will bid on that. So we're not going to have the opportunity like we usually do to kind of adjust things as we see bids at specific maturities coming in. This will be kind of an all-in, here's what we give you for this kind of package deal. Anything big, Jason, that we need to, okay. Are there any questions about that? We'll continue to review this in the market, and like I said, we're planning to introduce this month, adopt next month, so we'll have another shot at discussing this at the next committee meeting as well. Any questions about that one? All right, if not, I'm going to move to actuarial consulting services. So this is another item. This will be a resolution that will be at a board meeting, and this is to accept an option year. It's the second of 4 optional 1-year contract extensions with Milliman, our actuarial service provider. So they help us, obviously, with the defined benefit plan, do some of the reporting, annual reporting there. They've also recently started helping us more with the retirees calculating benefits and the options. We used to have a software service that did that. The provider is no longer servicing the software, and so after looking at the cost of a new software or using the actuary to do it, we decided that using Milliman is a better option. Plus, it's somebody local too, so if there's any questions or disputes, we can go to them. They can help us with the calculations, help the retiree understand the calculations as well. And so I think that's been a little bit of a benefit as well. They've done a good job for us, so I do recommend approval of exercising the contract extension with Milliman. Any questions about that? Okay. Trustee Fair, I don't have any other business for this finance meeting.
Okay, thank you, Tim. The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, November 3rd, which I understand is subject to change based on board discussion.
Good morning. Welcome to the Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting. I'd like to have a roll call, please.
All right, we'll note that all the trustees are present.
Okay, thank you. I have no comments. I'd ask the board members to take a look at the minutes from the last meeting, the meeting of September 1st, and I'll entertain a motion for approval if there are no comments to it.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We'll move on to item number 4, and Ms. Meyer will address the ordinance.
Good morning. This will be proposed ordinance 15549 on next week's agenda. The action will allow the district to enter into a contract with Beck Ostrom Suite LLC to provide legal services to collect excess proceeds from properties sold at the St. Louis City and St. Louis County tax sale auctions. The contract is for 1 year with 4 one-year renewal options at the discretion of the district. Beck Ostrom Suite has been a vendor with us since 2015. Over that time, they have collected over $580,000 for the district in excess of tax proceeds. They operate on a contingent fee. This contract, the contingent fee is 15.45%. That is down from the previous contract. The previous contract was at 16%. So my request is that the board approve this ordinance next week, and then we will have a new contract with Beck Ostrom and Suite LLC. Is there any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Meyer. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, item number 5. Ms. Paradis, our diversity annual report.
Thank you. I'll be giving our annual report for our fiscal year 2020. And I'd like to say good morning to trustees and all present here. And despite the pandemic last year, we had a rough second half of our fiscal year 2020. But despite that, we made adjustments as an essential service, and we kept our projects moving. And so we were able to keep MWBE contractors working. For this morning, our agenda will cover the capital programs, small contractors programs, diversity initiatives through our community benefits agreement. And we're going to start this off this morning with the construction capital information. In construction, we had 79 project awards worth nearly $144 million. 68 of those were non-building sewer construction projects. There were 11 state-funded projects with state utilization goals of 10% minority and 10% women. 4 projects you see listed here were under $50,000, and those projects, even without goals, had 50% MWBE participation. I'm happy to report that contracts awarded last year met all diversity goals. So we did not award any projects in last fiscal year that required the use of good faith efforts on the project. And you will also see here that 34 million or 24% of the nearly $144 million awarded went to MWBE participation. And during the same time period, payments to MWBE contractors on active construction projects reached $53 million, or almost 24% of all the payments that we paid out on construction contracts. In this next slide, we'll take a look at the workforce number. So to the left here, you'll see our current goals of 30% minority, 7% women, and 40% for apprentice training on building and non-building construction projects that exceed $500,000. Projects funded through the state revolving funds, they have goals of 14% minority and 6.9% women. And those goals apply to projects that exceed $10,000. To the right is a breakdown of the hours worked for fiscal year 2020. The building and non-building projects had a combined total of 581,233 hours on 113 active construction projects. And the state-funded projects had 48 active construction projects with 64,657 hours. Next slide. This next slide,
No, back one,
can
I
you go
think.
back one?
She went to.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks. This next slide dives a little deeper in that if you applied the construction goals of 30% minority and 7% women across our entire capital construction program, minorities represents 26.78% and women 7.18% of the total 732,000 hours worked last fiscal year. And 64.7% of the total training hours on these projects were minorities and women. These numbers represent 161 projects that actively worked last fiscal year, and collectively, from start to finish, they represent over 2.7 million project hours. Next slide.
Quick question. How easy is it to identify MSD project contractors working MSD projects on the street? Are they,
At every project site, there is a project sign that posts the actual name of the project on each project site that we're working on. And the prime contractors that have those projects are required to post that notice at every project site. Is there anything else, Rich?
So
that
it
we
will
identify?
it'll indicate it's an MSD project, clear project, name, dollar amount. If there's a source of funding, we're required to, there's something other than MSD funding, if it's SRF or some other federal funds, we're required to notify those.
you know, if we've got folks who are looking at projects and looking for evidence of minority participation, typically that's people. And if they don't know it's an MSD project, you know, they wouldn't necessarily know that the minority evidence is associated with them.
Yeah, if you go through the life of a project, Trustee Wilson, for those whose yards we're going through, they know that's an MSD project. That sign is usually placed at a thoroughfare place where you can see. There's a very large Deer Creek project, and it happens to be at Litzing, the sign happens to be at McKnight Road. I happen to drive by it once in a while. So while that may not be exactly where all the work's going on, they do try and place those signs at the most obvious places with people driving by. Unfortunately, with the project being 5-6 miles long sometimes, you don't necessarily see that. We do on occasion get calls and folks ask, if you're digging a hole in the ground, they usually think it's us.
Yep.
Unless they see water pipes sitting on the side, then they know it's the water company. But it seems like the current efforts we put forward, that hasn't been an issue so far. It had been in the past, making sure they knew which jobs are ours. But right now, the current method we have of communicating seems to be working.
Well, I was just earlier Chairman Yates indicated that often people see work going. He's had feedback where people were asking, didn't see the evidence of minority participation that they thought they should, and had questions about it being MSD, and it wasn't necessarily.
And it's usually not those kind of folks, it's actually private developers who are
Yeah.
putting sewers in as part of their project. Oftentimes, folks think that's an MSD project as well. Those are the ones we get most of our calls on.
I'd like
Okay.
to also add that the diversity department does have MWBE compliance inspectors in MSD vehicles who are out on each project site that is actively working on a daily basis as well. So that might give someone, evidence that, this might be something that MSD is involved in with those vehicles out on those project sites every day.
Yeah, I know now we're talking about the construction numbers in the construction project. How evident is there, but we just went through a number of projects that were appraisal projects, projects that would not be evident that it's an MSD-related project. So you wouldn't know what well, you may not even know, but the public may not recognize what's being done in an appraisal project. So how do we market?
Well, one of the ways
total.
one of the ways that we put the information out in the public is we do post, for instance, on a monthly basis, we post our data and information on our diversity website. So that is one way that if the public is interested in getting actual information regarding our participation on our projects, we do post that on a monthly basis. Some reports are monthly in terms of payments made to the contractors on our projects. Some reports are either quarterly or semi-annually. But that information is always readily available, at least going back 1 year on our website. And in terms of the work that's actually taking place at the moment, we post certain information on a monthly basis.
Thank you. Apologize for interrupting your
problem.
presentation.
Happy to respond. Let's see. Overall, with this slide, we're just showing you where we've been in the past 3 years. And overall, in fiscal year 20, MSD contractors did a great job with diverse workforce despite the challenges brought forth in the second half of 2020, as you can see here. Although the construction industry struggles with women participation in construction, MSD contractors have met the 7% women goals 2 years in a row now. So this is our second successful year that we've had with meeting our women goals. And although you might see a slight dip in the percentage points for the minority participation for this past fiscal year, that's really attributed to the number of SRF funded projects that we had and our number that had goals of 14.7% minority participation in lieu of the 30% that we placed across the entire program. So we had, a few more SRF funded projects that met the goals, but it brought our minority participation down because they're only required to meet 14.7% minority participation. They did pretty good in that area. So this next slide will cover our design information for our capital program. And in the area of design, there were 11 design contract awards totaling $2.6 million, with 36.87% of the spend committed to MWBEs without any goals in place. MBEs received 736,000 or 28.29%, and WBEs received 223,000 or 8.5% in project commitments. 45.92% of payments worth $8 million were made to diverse companies. MBEs took in $6.2 million or 35.82%, while WBEs received $1.7 million or 10% of the total project funds. In terms of local office workforce for design professional services, where we have goals of 18% minority and 32% women, we've maintained pretty consistent numbers with 17.71% minorities and 37.38% women, representing the local office workforce on MSD design projects. Next slide. Utilization of minorities and women have been pretty consistent over the past 3 years, where we see a continuation of women participation being more dominant in the design area, as you can see here on these charts. Next slide. Next is information on our small contractor program. The small contractor program offers opportunities for minority and women construction contractors to perform as primes with more informal bidding requirements. Last year, the threshold for bidding these projects increased from $25,000 to $50,000. This is a program that's been in existence at MSD for many years, and where we've seen contractors be able to grow their capacity to eventually be able to compete as pre-qualified contractors on more complex capital projects. We continue to see participation upward of 30% over the past 3 years on this program. In terms of this diverse program participation, you see here that 34.61% of total program dollars was diverse. And in terms of the number of projects, both sanitary and storm had about 30% participation. This program has been tremendous in terms of giving small businesses opportunities to gain valuable experience in the sewer construction industry and to be able to grow their capacity. Next slide. Here I'll be covering the community benefits agreement activities. MSD entered into this agreement with the signatories listed here in 2013. We agreed to work with community stakeholders to ensure that MSD would participate with community-based partners to address initiatives to promote equity and equality. To the right of this slide lists meetings and some of the initiatives we were able to focus on this past year despite the challenges that we faced with the pandemic. Next slide. Our last physical meeting was held October 30th last year during the first quarter of 2020. The agenda items we covered consisted of the first hiring program, RFP, community benefits agreement steering committee. We presented diversity's annual report and gave an update of our disparity study timeline. MSD, along with the signatories, discussed the upcoming RFP for the first source hiring program. MSD proceeded with the procurement and subsequently did not receive any responses because the RFP responses were due right in the middle of the height of the pandemic. So what we plan to do is to revisit this agenda item with the signatories at our next formal meeting with the CBA signatories.
When is that meeting?
It hasn't been scheduled yet, so as soon as we have it on the books, we'll notify the board of when that will be.
We do have, Trustee Wilson, there are 3 virtual gatherings that we've agreed to, one having to do with this report, one having to do with the status on the disparity study, and the last one was allowing them to provide any comments to Shauna's annual report. So we set a virtual schedule for the last half of this calendar year, and I think we agreed as we reach the end of that, we'll then set what the meeting, we'll see what the world looks like then, figure out how to move forward.
Thanks.
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Mhm.
Shauna, so Slate is the incumbent on the First Source? It's testing my memory, but I thought that's correct.
Correct. It was Slate that administered our First Source hiring program, and the First Source hiring program expired at the end of our last fiscal year. And so that's the reason why we went out with an RFP.
So there's so as of 2020, there is no provider for First Source?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not receive any responses. We even extended the RFP 2 30-day periods to try to see if anyone would respond. But again, we were right in the middle of the pandemic situation, and no one was really, as a result of the survey we did, no one was really interested in responding for First Source hiring. They were trying to figure out the new world.
Got it. So have you made a decision that it's necessary or desirable to continue First Source?
Well, as of now, we are not continuing with the old First Source hiring program, and First Source hiring program being a component of the CBA agreement, we will need to discuss the future of that program as it pertains to our community benefits agreement with the signatories.
I see. Okay, thanks, Shauna.
You're welcome. MSD and the CBA signatories discussed the results of that competitive selection for our workforce development job training program, in which the Building Union Diversity Program was awarded a grant to provide a training gateway for women, minorities, economically disadvantaged adults, and high school students. BUD would also provide an introduction by way of apprenticeship training, pre-apprenticeship training, in partnership with the various unions in the construction industry, and have a particular focus on employment in sewer construction occupations. We discussed the program goals for BUD, which includes concentrated outreach efforts within distressed communities, and training of adults and high school juniors and seniors. Unfortunately, for a period of time through August, the pandemic brought a halt to the outreach efforts, mentoring, programming, and the recruitment in BUD. Now we've extended the grant programming through the end of this calendar year, and we'll be reporting on the BUD program in my semi-annual report for this fiscal year. But I'm happy to report that recruitment and everything got started again in July of this year. The first class for pre-apprenticeship training started back in August, and they did have a class cohort graduation in September. So I'll also be reporting on the outcome for that in the BUD program during my semi-annual report. Another area of focus with the CBA is education and internships. This past summer, despite the challenges again of the pandemic, MSD sponsored 4 paid internships for high school and college students in the areas of information technology and operation. MSD also sponsored treatment plant internships for the Environmental Resource Training Certification Program through SIUE. And there was a little delay, although there was a little delay, the 2 scholarship recipients are nearing the end of their program, and they're now preparing to take their certification exams for treatment plant operations. And finally, we are more than 3/4 of the way to completing our update to the disparity study. We anticipate that we will be done with the final draft by December and ready with the final study and employment reports at the beginning of the calendar year 2021.
So Sean, I gather those dates should be 2020 versus 2019?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It should be 2020. So on on this chart that you see here, the events that took place in 2018 and 2019, those are the correct dates. Where you see Mason Tillman, now where we're performing the analysis on prime contractor, subcontractor, and availability, that went from April 2019 through now. Well, will be November 2020.
Got it.
So what happens next is that we'll communicate the disparity study results to the board. We'll present those results with the recommendations for acceptance. We'll communicate the results to staff, stakeholders, and to the public. And then we'll devise an implementation plan for implementing the results that the board has accepted by the end of this fiscal year. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you. Very good report, Shonda.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John. Okay, we'll move on to the item 6, and that's Director.
Yeah, I'm going to very quickly just go over the process again with everybody there for the vice chairman election. While I'm doing that, Secretary Treasurer Snoke's going to hand out documents for the last 2 items. It doesn't have to do with this one, but we're trying to multitask here a little bit. So just so everybody knows, at the end of the board meeting in October, the last action will be the election of a vice chairman. Mr. Snoke's going to go ahead and he will run the process. First, we're going to ask if there's any comments or questions from the board members prior to starting that process. Once we do, Mr. Snoke will ask the trustees whether or not the vice chair has to be a city trustee. So the question will be, do the county trustees wish to nominate a city trustee as vice chair? Then he will ask whether or not there's a second for that. He will then ask again if there's any others. It has been in the past On occasion, we've had 2 individuals nominated for an officer position, so it's not unheard of. It could possibly happen. But the nominations will be the first part. And remember, this is just, this process is only for the county trustees. The county trustees are going to decide to nominate and second city trustees to serve as the vice chair. This vice chairmanship will last through March 15th, 2021. It is filling the remaining term of Jim Fall as the vice chairman. Again, it's the last item we'll do. Vice chairman will take that seat. Just so you know, when we come to March and April 2021, we will go through the whole process again for both chairman and vice chair, since those terms end March 15th, 2021. But again, when Tim starts the process, don't be surprised. It's only a process for participation as far as nominating and seconding for the county trustees, because it's a city trustee who they're deciding to elect as the vice chair. So I think what I'll do is just, are there any questions as to what that process looks like or how we would move forward with that? Okay, the only thing I'd ask is if, as we get closer, if you have some questions, just to make sure we got that right, let me know. Again, Tim will go through the explanation, and again, it'll be the last item on the October board meeting. Okay, I'll pass it on. That one's completed, Trustee Wilson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Director. We'll go on to item 7 with Mr. Snow.
All right. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about upcoming and proposed ordinance that'll be on the agenda for introduction for a bond election. I know we have some new trustees, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history. I'm going to speak off of the documents that I just gave you, just go through a little bit of a timeline. But when we go through our rate proposal process every few years, one thing we do is we determine how much bonding we need to fund the capital project for a period of time. We determined we needed an additional $500 million of bonding authorization to complete the projects that were included in the rate period, fiscal year 21 through 24. The rate commission, after reviewing our recommendation, agreed and put that in their rate recommendation. The board then accepted the rate commission's recommendation through Board Resolution 3547 last October. And then you adopted an ordinance last December ordering that a bond election be held on April 7th, 2020, earlier this year, for that $500 million. What happened around that time, though, was the pandemic. So one of the things that we do before these bond elections is we spend a fair amount of time trying to educate the public and voters on what that bond election is. And so that second page you have here is one of the things that we went around and talked to people about. On the page you can see the big thing is what their rates will look like with bond financing and without bond financing. So what we're asking voters to vote on, we're not asking whether or not we do the capital project because those are mandated through the consent decree. We're asking them how they want to pay for them. So if they vote yes for bond authorization, rates stay lower near term because we fund about 60% in these next 4 years of the projects with bond proceeds. If they vote no, then we have to use only rate funding, which means we have to increase rates more to get that cash. So it's important we educate them so that they understand that a no vote means higher rates immediately, and a yes vote means that their rates stay lower in the near term. So we weren't able to complete that education because of the pandemic, and there started to be restrictions on number of people that could, come together in a meeting. There were restrictions on the number of people, and we didn't have time to really, we weren't set up to go virtually at that time. So what we did, after talking to the board, was that we put an ordinance before you that you adopted authorizing the district to make sure that the votes cast at the election were not counted, because we were afraid that without the proper education, that the community really wasn't prepared to vote. What happened was the election ended up getting delayed till June. Our judge did accept our filings to not count the election votes. It meant that the city actually didn't have to have a city election because we were the only item on that election. And so where we stand today is we have never received that authorization. Now, we have some additional authorizations still, so we're able to continue to do some borrowings like the SRF that we closed this month, like the proposed $150 million that I put before you a little bit ago. But we're at the point where we do need to put this back on the ballot. And so this ordinance that we'll be bringing before you Thursday is really identical to the ordinance that went before you and that you adopted last year, just changes the date of the election. And so the idea is to put the $500 million bond authorization, Proposition Y, onto the April 6, 2021 ballot. And so that is what we are asking for. The idea would be to introduce this in October, adopt in November, then in January I'll file all the paperwork with help of bond counsel to get on the April ballot, and then we'll have the vote in April. Prior to that, again, going through the education process that we usually do, going around to different community groups to make sure that people understand what they're voting on. Any questions about that? Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, Thank
you.
you. Mr. Snooks. Okay, back to you, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. I'm going to be talking off of the document you have in front of you, Plan Amendment Commission PAC recommendation dated September 29th, 2020. The Plan Amendment Commission made 17 recommendations for adjustments to MSD's charter. The idea is any of these that the board approves will also be on that same April ballot that Tim had announced. So of those 17 recommendations, and based on discussions with the trustees, staff revised its recommendations on 4 of those items. And I believe we have consensus from the trustees on all of those 4 items. But the first thing I'll do is briefly review each one of those to see if the trustees wish to discuss those 4 items. Those will be items 9, 12, 15, and 16. And I'll go very slow when we're going through this, and I'll explain what changes were made based on consultations with the board members. Next, there is one recommendation that I don't believe has consensus from the trustees. That's item 7. I'm going to quickly review the status of that item and then give the discussion back to the Board of Trustees to have whatever discussion you want on that item. Finally, there are 12 items that since day one I've heard absolutely no concern from any of the trustees. A lot of them are pretty simple. They're just kind of updates and updating of some of the language that's in the charter. But I will indicate which ones those are and see if the trustees would like to discuss any of those 12 items. So I'm going to go ahead and start the process. I'd ask you turn to item 9. It's in your documents, the first item under topic 2. And it is passage of ordinances. Originally, staff and the Plan Amendment Commission recommended that instead of having 2 trustees from the city and 2 trustees from the county to pass legislation, it was recommended that we change that to just 4 individuals. The change being then 1 trustee from one appointing authority and 3 from another appointing authority could pass legislation. Some of the board members expressed a concern that that went just a little too far, while it addressed the issue that some of you have experienced that we've had where due to an absence or primarily due to conflict of interest, sometimes we can't act on items solely because of conflict of interest, not because there's any concern about the item. So in talking with primarily with Trustee Fair, I'll read what's in the red. The new language we're proposing to put in is the existing language is an affirmative vote by 2 members of the board appointed from the city of St. Louis and 2 members of the board from the St. Louis County shall be necessary to pass any ordinance, resolution, regulation, rule, or order. What we're going to add is, except that with at least 5 board members present and unanimous consent of all board members present, affirmative vote of any 4 board members shall be sufficient for passage. So it puts us back to allowing only 4 board members needed for passage, but it requires all the board members to consent to putting that rule. It'd be somewhat similar to Tim Snoke asking if anybody has any objection to suspension of the rules when we do introduction and adoption. The idea is to do the same thing. That change, quite honestly, addresses the issue that MSD, or at least staff, saw, and that is due to an absence or primarily due to conflict of interest, we're unable to do business, even though all the board members present are probably for the item. This allows by unanimous consent of the board that we go to just 4 board members being able to pass legislation. It's still very much in the spirit of the original language. Best I know and the best I could tell, the board members as a whole right now are okay with the language that's being proposed. And so staff's recommendation is to put that language in to make that the item on the agenda, on the ballot. Are there any comments or questions from any of the board members? Okay. Next one I'll move to, I would ask you turn to item 12. It's the second item under topic 3. The recommendation here drew from a concern of the Rate Commission. One of the factors they have to use to evaluate a rate proposal is they have to determine if the proposal imposes a fair and equitable burden on all classes of ratepayers. Some of the rate commissioners expressed a concern that that was an absolute standard for them to determine whether or not, in their mind, it is actually fair and equitable for every single class of ratepayers. Some of the rate commissioners expressed a concern in being able to address that. So staff's original recommendation was to change that, and this, in talking with the officers of the Rate Commission, they thought this would resolve the issue, that they should consider all classes of ratepayers in determining a fair and reasonable burden. Plan Amendment Commission thought that was a good recommendation. That's what came to the trustees. Trustee Wilson, I believe, wanted a little more definition on exactly what was considered. So if you see right after that statement in red, the new language that's being proposed is to consider the financial impact on all classes of ratepayers in determining a fair and reasonable burden. That in staff's opinion, that addresses the concerns expressed by the Rate Commission and does give a little more guidance on exactly what the Rate Commission is supposed to be looking at as it reviews proposals. That's where we stand right now. Are there any board members who would like to have a further discussion on that item? Okay, the next one is item 15. I'll do the short version of this. Well, I'll make it as short as I can. When the board was originally formed, or when MSD was originally formed in 1954, the practice was to have 2 board meetings per month, every 2 weeks. And the compensation is currently set at $25 per regular meeting of the board. There were no committee meetings. It was just a regular meeting. Since then, that $25 per meeting day has remained constant since 1954. And the last 2 rate commissions, the issue has come up that the Rate Commission felt that's not adequate. What staff's recommendation was to match current practices and to provide something equitable, kind of in line with the original intent of the charter, was to change it so that the board members would be compensated $25 for every day you attended a public meeting of the board. So in today's world, that means not just the board meeting, but these committee meetings. So on a typical month, the board members would be compensated for 2 meeting days. Staff had recommended leaving it at $25 per day. After extensive discussion by the Plan Amendment Commission, they still felt $25 for the public meetings was insufficient. That's why their recommendation went to $35. They thought $25 was inadequate. They wanted to raise it to $35. After having discussions with all the board members, I think what we have consensus on moving forward to put up for, to consider for a vote is to go back to staff's original recommendation and make the change, make the compensation still $25 per meeting day, but make it for all public meetings of the Board of Trustees. which typically would be committee meetings and board meetings. And I believe there's a consensus on the board. That's where staff's recommendation stands, unless the board would like to open up the floor for any kind of discussion. Okay, then the last one I'll go is, and this will be very quick, item 16. One of the things the rate commission indicated, right now our rate commissioners get paid $20 per meeting day. They felt that if there's a change in the board's compensation, it ought to be matched for the Civil Service Commission. So what's proposed on the charter is to raise the compensation for the Civil Service Commission per meeting day from $20 per day to $25 per day to match the compensation for the Board of Trustees. And I believe we have consensus on that item, unless some of the board members would like to discuss. Okay, then what I'd recommend, if you would go to item 7, this is the item that I will just provide some information to bring you up to speed on where we are with this, and then I'll need to hear comments from the board and get some guidance from the trustees on where to proceed. Right now, our charter indicates that if an employee wants a hearing in front of the Civil Service Commission, it shall be a public hearing. Right now, staff's current practice, when there is a public hearing, when there is a hearing of discipline against an employee, those public hearings are opened, but then we close them because they contain personnel records in order to be in line with the Sunshine Law and not provide personal information. And we go into kind of a closed session for those folks to be able to have that appeal. Staff's recommending the word public in there at least one time has confused some folks who have to appeal in front of the Public Service Commission, in front of the Civil Service Commission. And they've asked, well, can it be public? And we've had to indicate no by these current sunshine laws. These are personnel issues, personnel records, and the meeting itself needs to be closed to the public. There's still permitted witnesses, there's still permitted representation. It's just not something open to the press, open to the public to be able to attend those hearings. So that's staff's and the Plan Amendment Commission's recommendation is just simply drop the word public when referring to a Civil Service Commission hearing for an employee. One of the questions we were asked to do is check what is going on in the city and the county, and we checked their current requirements. For the city of St. Louis, for their Civil Service Commission, for Civil Service Commission public hearings, their rules state all hearings shall be closed to the public. No further action shall be required from the commission, the hearing officer, or the parties to close such hearings. So based on the wording of their rules, they also close all hearings regarding personnel matters in front of the Civil Service Commission. Civil Service Commission, I said that correctly. Mm-hmm. The county, the wording on theirs, the county indicates that all hearings shall be public, except the appointing authority or the employee may request that meetings regarding an employer's dismissal or suspension for more than 30 days in a 12-month period be closed. So the wording of their rules seem to indicate that it's open unless there's a request under these parameters by either the appointing authority or the employee. Staff recommends that we maintain our current practice. We believe it's in line with Sunshine Law, and our recommendation still remains the same, that the word public be dropped from that hearing, just to provide, to make sure that the charter language is in line with what we believe is following current state law and also our current practices. There is not a unanimous consent, as best I can tell, amongst the board members with regard to that recommendation, and that would be to remove public, the word public, from that hearing. So that's where we stand, and staff, I think it's appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, since Chairman Wilson, since you're the chairman of this committee, I guess we'd like to open it up and allow the board members a chance to have a discussion regarding that item.
That item is now open for discussion.
Well, I'm happy to go first unless someone,
Go ahead.
well, I'm really the one that raised this issue. I think the assumption behind the change of the charter is legally faulty or over aggressive. That if you look at the exception in the Sunshine Act, it says that personnel records are excluded from disclosure in the Sunshine Act. It doesn't say that civil service commission hearings over discipline or discharge are closed to the public. And so you'd have to conclude that if the assumption of this change is that they must be closed, then you'd have to conclude that St. Louis County is operating in violation of the Sunshine Act. And as a county trustee, I just can't accept that. And just based on, as a lawyer who's spent my career in the labor and employment field, I've looked at these documents and the law. I don't agree with that reading. So that's just sort of the technical legal issue that's sort of underpinning this amendment. But, to me, what's much more important than that is that, what is the principle of the Sunshine Act? I mean, we are a government entity. And I understand it's a pain in the neck to comply with the Sunshine Act, but I still really believe in its principles. And, I was trying to think of something recently that came up which would illustrate why this is important in terms of this public access. And what came to mind was something that occurred in the county. And, really all I know about is what I read in the papers. But one of the, top police officers who was gay was, the subject of a discrimination. He was, I guess he hadn't gotten promoted, or I don't know if he was disciplined, but he filed a lawsuit against the county, and there was a large settlement of public money, caused was a black eye for the county. And if you say that a hearing isn't public, that means the press isn't allowed in. So you'd have to say to the Post-Dispatch and other press, the TV stations or whoever, no, there's no public access. It's secret. That just doesn't seem right to me. And the second thing that concerned me was that for years there's been a rule that actually Brian had shared, that had done some research at the request of Trustee Fall and confirmed this, that to be represented at a Civil Service Commission hearing, you have to have an attorney. And that sort of frequently cuts against the sort of common assumption that a union representative, in the case of a union employee, or in the case of a non-union, a person of their choosing, could be their representative. The theory of this rule is that it's the unauthorized practice of law. Brian and I had some discussions. Brian thought that the MSD Civil Service Commission had gotten around this rule had addressed it by concluding that their hearings were not legal. But actually, the analysis that Brian shared to me was that the MSD charter trumps whatever Missouri state law was the basis of this ruling. So, there is this cloud, at least, that in the future, the Civil Service Commission could do the same thing that the city does, which is to say that you've got to have your own lawyer to have a representative before the commission. And the final point I want to make to you is this, that when you amend the charter, it takes it out of the hands of the board. I mean, this is going to be a voter-approved amendment. So that if somebody comes to us in the future and says, you know, your Civil Service Commission is improperly excluding the press, or your Civil Service Commission is not permitting a union representative to represent a worker before it, that our hands are going to be tied. You know, we've pulled out the word public. And I think that, you know, what Brian has explained to me is, well, if the amendment doesn't go through, we'll be preserving the status quo because we're not really being asked to amend the rules of our Civil Service Commission, which would require a separate action of the board. And so, you know, I said, well, okay, you know, I'm not proposing at this point to upset, you know, to take a look at the civil service rules, which actually I do disagree with. I think it should be the county rules. But we're not adopting the county rule. We're simply not tying our hands in the future to addressing these issues that I've outlined for you. So that's why I continue to feel very strongly about it. In fact, I feel even stronger than I did when I originally raised the point.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Singer. Is there any other
I'd like to
comments
say
on
something.
this issue?
Yes, sir.
Jim, we have a question for you.
Excuse me, Mike has the floor on the issue right now. You're next.
Okay.
After 30-something years as a business agent, I've sat on a lot of civil service hearings, and they've all been private. And the issue of making it public, you're just airing your business in the street. And the idea that you want the papers there, that just makes things worse, because I don't believe nothing I read in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch anymore. I don't even buy it. But I think it should be a private hearing, and you don't, the lawyers, if it's a union person, the union provides them a lawyer anyway.
And doesn't the union contract trump the civil service? If it's a union person, doesn't the union contract for grievances and that sort of thing, that would tend to trump the Civil Service Commission?
Yeah.
So we're actually talking about something that probably applies only to non.
No, we're talking about union people too. We do our own grievances and things.
No,
You're getting off on a different pattern. I'm talking about when you go to a civil service hearing, and I represented a lot of our members that were union. Civil service had a hearing, and it wasn't public. It was all private. And it was just the union there, the employee, and our union attorney. And when you start opening up to the public, you're just making matters worse, because the newspapers get involved. And then when you go to something that happened, they'll go back and pull out something that happened 30 or 40 years ago. And then next thing you know, well, damn, they pulled that out and that happened. I'm going to take this case back.
Okay, Amy? Ms. Fair?
Yes. So, Jim, you know, one of the things that you didn't, I don't think, talk about is, I mean, is in your view, is it in the interest of the employee to have the discretion to determine whether their hearing is public or private?
Well, the way I actually like the way the county has done it, that there may be instances where you would want to close it. Maybe the employee is saying this is embarrassing, or, I'd like it closed. Or the appointing authority, in this case, MSD would say, well, this is one where we're going to close it. But, I can tell you, and I respect your experience, Mike, but our firm has had the opposite experience, not at MSD, but at the city, where the union has wanted to appear as the representative of the employee before the Civil Service Commission, and they've been excluded. And they've been told that it's not enough for the union attorney to be there. The attorney, whatever attorney appears, has to enter their appearance as the attorney for the individual employee. That is how the city or at least in the past, has interpreted these rules. I realize it's not how the MSD Commission currently interprets it. But to me, there would be instances where an employee, and I give the example of the controversy over this police officer, that he may have decided, there's things going on here in secret that I would like the public to be aware of. And that needs to be weighed and decided and shouldn't just be automatically, no, it's closed to the public.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Director.
Trustee Wilson, and these are just informational. My intent is not to get into the discussion, but the current charter does require that such employee shall be entitled to legal counsel or representative of his or her own choosing if he, she so desires. So right now, our current charter, and any change of that is not in front of you right now unless you wish it to be. So right now, the charter currently allows a representative of the choosing of the employee to represent them. I forgot what my other point was going to be. That's the primary point, at least with regard to representation. That's a current charter requirement, not a Civil Service Commission requirement. So just regard to the information or the discussion having to do with their representative.
Brian, can I ask a question of you?
I may pass it on to Susan if I get out of my lane here, but go ahead.
Okay, so I understand the current practice is that the meetings are closed to the public. That's the current practice. Are there any reasons for that other than the interpretation of the Sunshine Law?
So I am going to pass that on to Susan Myers to go ahead and respond.
No, the meetings are considered public, just like our board meetings or our rate commission meetings or any other type of meeting we have with a governing body. And then we go into closed session under a personnel matter for the civil service hearings. Just like we would do for when we go into closed session in a board meeting with you all. We name the actual exclusion from the Sunshine Law, and that's where how the meeting is closed.
But is there any reason for that other than the Sunshine Law?
No.
Well, why do we go there then, if I might ask? If the Sunshine Law is not driving us there, and the charter is not driving us there, why are we going?
I think Susan said the Sunshine Law is driving it, but it's the only one that's driving us to close those meetings.
Correct. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
So, and I have not reviewed, that specific provision. I mean, obviously, Jim thinks that the Sunshine Law does not require the closure of those meetings. And Susan, I presume that you think that it does, right?
Yes, for personnel matters such as discipline, suspension, that sort of thing, yes.
I think we're at a point that it sounds like that's the only issue that you wanted resolved in this discussion. So
process-wise, one, we have to put something up for introduction at the October meeting. If I had 5 of you say we don't want to make the change, staff would take that off and we would remove that item. If there's any discussion going back and forth, I think staff's plan would be to leave it as it's currently written with taking public off. And then at the time that item comes up, we can go through the discussion and amendment process if the board wishes on that particular item. Unless I get some real clear guide. I'm trying to give you language as close as I can to what I think you find acceptable. So,
It sounds like this particular issue, we are not close to a unanimous, certainly not close to.
and now it doesn't have to be, the vote has to be two city, two county. And that's what I'm looking for is whether, yeah.
If we don't, I mean, I guess what I'm looking for is what you want to move forward.
So if the board feels more comfortable with us simply taking this item off the ballot, we are willing to do that. Again, I think as Susan's expressed, it won't change our process. But we think for clarity and to really match with our current practice, we agree with the Plan Amendment Commission, we should remove the term public.
I would entertain a motion.
He didn't ask that trustee yet.
I'm sorry.
He didn't ask Mike yet.
Oh, Mike, do you have anything? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what Chairman Yates had said earlier, my experience, and it's usually outstate in smaller towns, representing labor organizations, the press has never been our friend to litigate this thing in the public sphere. I suppose if that's what your strategy is anyway, you can always call the Post-Dispatch and talk to them after your hearing, whether they're present there or not. It's somewhat of a dubious strategy, I think, but I don't have an issue with the language that exists, particularly due to the fact that we already have the provision in the charter that provides for union representation during the meeting, so making it close to the public isn't an issue.
Mike, it's not in the charter. It's in the rules of civil service.
Just to give, just so you understand, we're proposing to take public off a public hearing in the charter for the Civil Service Commission. We're not planning on putting it that it has to be closed. We're just proposing to take the word public from that, and we would be guided, as in this case, by the Sunshine Law.
And then where was the language concerning the representative being an attorney or a union being present at the hearing?
That's in the charter.
That's all.
It's currently
Oh,
in the
that
charter.
is in the
Yes.
charter?
It's section
Oh, I
8.0.
apologize, Mike.
It's the last sentence in section 8.060.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to make one final comment. As a county trustee, the logic, Susan is her legal opinion is that the county is operating in violation of civil service, in violation of the Sunshine Act. I just, I don't accept that.
But I don't think this,
to be appointed by the county and to say, well, the county, is doing a violation of the Sunshine Act, our appointing authority doesn't agree with that. Three.
Okay,
who's
we
appointed
can
three.
talk about this till 3:00 this afternoon.
You're
I don't
right.
see it.
So
I don't see us getting anywhere, because you might be right, Jim, but I don't think that's the issue that we're gonna resolve today by whatever decision is made on that language.
Yeah. Here's how I've now, and thank you for mentioning Trustee Evans. So what staff's going to recommend and we'll put up for you to consider is we're going to leave, I think, removing public based on the voices I've heard. We're going to leave that on the agenda item for you to consider. I suspect you may have this same discussion at the time that it comes up in front of the board. It is only for introduction. So it'll be set right now for introduction in October, then a delay, then adoption in November. So now that I've heard everyone, and I suspect there's a chance that this has the ability to pass as a 2-2 vote possibly, I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there and allow the board to consider it along with the other 16 items that are on the changes. I think our recommendation, the document in front of you at the board meeting will have that change listed in there for a change in the charter.
Okay?
And we go for introduction, there's introduction, and then Tim's going to make absolutely sure if there's any discussion after we go through introduction, and we can work through it then and see what adjustments the board would like to make.
Okay, are there any other questions, any other issues? Because I'm terminated.
So the last one I had is, so I guess the ones that I've never had any question about would be the balance of those. The remaining 12, I think the last question I'd ask, does anybody have an issue with the other 12 items that we're making adjustments on? Okay, then what we'll do is we'll put the ordinance up, leaving the removal of the word public for all those 17 items, and allow you to address that as part of the introduction process then. That's what we'll put in front of the board to consider.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Director. There's no other business, there's no other agenda business. Does anyone have anything they wish to say before we finish today? Okay, if not, the next meeting will be it's tentatively scheduled for the 3rd of November. That is likely to change, as the director said earlier. If there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I thank you for your attention. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, trustees.